Hello and welcome back to or welcome to my channel. So I do a lot of crochet tutorials on this channel, and I have realized that I tend to kind of lean on the same 4 or 5 stitches that I like to pull up and use in a lot of my designs. Beyond just the basic like single crochet, half double crochet, double and treble crochet, which are great classics that I definitely use in almost all my designs, there are a couple extra crochet stitches that I think really add to the crochet design. And I personally think that it is really beneficial to have these crochet stitches in your repertoire if you're planning on designing your own crochet wearables. The first stitch that I'm going to show you is this mesh crochet that I used on the sleeves of this top here. This is a great stitch if you're trying to crochet quite quickly. It takes up a lot of space very quickly. It's also quite breathable because it is just all mesh, completely see-through, but it's wonderful for things like sleeves or even the midriff section of a top, or for sort of a cover-up, a wraparound, anything like that. It is such a nice stitch for that. It uses very little yarn, is perfect for beginners, and it adds such a fun texture to your crochet pieces. And this one is more of a organized mesh stitch. It's more stacked neatly on top of itself and makes these very distinct sort of square shapes. This is the first of 2 different mesh designs I'm going to show you today. But let's go ahead and jump right into the tutorial for this first mesh stitch. So to complete this first mesh crochet stitch, you want to start by making a chain of any amount. After you have made the chain that is the length that you want, you're then going to go ahead and chain another 3. So I'm going to chain 3 more, like so, and then I'm going to yarn over and place a double crochet into that 3rd chain there, or the 4th chain. So from where we chained 3, I'm then placing my double crochet into that chain before we chained 3, so into that 3rd chain. So I'm inserting my hook, and then I'm going to do a double crochet stitch like so, and then I'm going to chain 1, and now going down to the chain here, I'm going to skip this next chain stitch, and instead I'm going to go into the one after it. So I'm skipping this stitch after that double crochet, and I'm going into the one right after that and placing another double crochet. And then I'm going to chain 1, and then again going down to the chain here, I'm going to skip this next chain stitch, I'm going into the one after it, and then placing a double crochet like so, and then chain 1. Again, skip the next stitch, and into the one after it, place a double crochet, chain 1, skip the stitch after it, into the next one, place a double crochet. And so now you can already see that mesh sort of taking place, where we have these sort of gaps in between each of those double crochet stitches. And I'm showing you just the basic mesh where we only have 1 chain in between, but you can alter this and you could chain 2 in between each stitch, or you could chain 3, or really any number that you want to. The number of chains that you place in between each double crochet is then equal to the number of stitches that you skip. So if I were to chain 2 after this double crochet, I would then skip the next 2 stitches and then double crochet into the 3rd stitch. But because I'm only chaining 1 for this mesh crochet, I'm then going to skip 1 chain stitch and double crochet into the stitch right after that one. So here is that first row of the mesh crochet completed, and now we're going to go ahead and start the next row. So what you do is you start by chaining 2. 2 chains equals the height of 1 double crochet, and then off of that you're going to chain the same number of chains that you have placed in between each double crochet. So for this demonstration, I'm only chaining 1 in between each stitch, so I'm going to chain an additional 1. So therefore I have 3 chains here. But if you did a double crochet, chain 2, and then double crochet, you would then chain another 2. So you're doing 2 chains for each double crochet, and then whatever number of chains you have in between the double crochet stitches, you're then doing that as well. So in this case, I have 3 chains because I have 2 chains for my double crochet and 1 chain for the chain 1s that I'm placing in between each double crochet stitch. So now that I have those 3 chains, I'm then going to turn my work, and then I'm going to skip past this first double crochet and that chain 1, and I'm going into the next double crochet here. I'm inserting my hook right into that stitch, and I'm going to place a double crochet like so, and then chain 1, and then double crocheting into that next stitch. And we're just skipping right over the chain section and just going straight to the next double crochet stitch. So I'm chaining 1 and then double crocheting into the next double crochet stitch, like so, and then chain 1 and double crochet into the next double crochet stitch. And you're just going to repeat this all the way down to the end of the row. So chain 1, double crochet. And now at the end of the row here, there is no distinct double crochet stitch. Instead, we have sort of a loop of 3 chains where we made that chain and then chained an additional 3 and then backtracked. That's these 3 chains here. So I'm going to chain 1, and then I'm going to go past the first chain. I'm going to insert my hook into the second chain because that second chain acts as the height of the double crochet. So I'm going past the first chain into the second chain, inserting my hook and placing a double crochet, like so. And then again, I'm going to chain 3. So the first 2 chains is the height of the double crochet stitch, and then the third chain is that extra chain 1 that we place in between each double crochet stitch. I'm then going to turn my work, and now we're going to do one more row here together. So I'm going to yarn over, I'm going to jump all the way over to this next double crochet stitch here, insert my hook, and place a double crochet stitch. Chain 1, double crochet into the next stitch. And again, you can do this with any number of chains in between the double crochets. It doesn't have to be just 1, but you do want to be consistent with that number. So I'm just sticking here with chaining 1 and then double crocheting into the next stitch. And then again, at the end of this row here, I'm going to chain 1, and then here we have that chain 3 that we started the row with. So I'm going past the first chain. I'm going to insert my hook right into that second chain, like so, and then double crochet into the second chain, like so. And then you're going to chain 3, so 2 chains for the double crochet, 1 additional chain for the chains in between each stitch, and then turn your work. And that is how you do this sort of more organized, structured mesh crochet. You can see that each stitch is placed neatly on top of the other, and you just have these nice neat gaps in between all the stitches. So that's how to do the very first version of mesh crochet. The next stitch that I want to show you is this mesh stitch. This one I like to call more of like a dragon scale or a mermaid's tail type stitch. Instead of having those uniform square shapes, we're having more of a diamond shape here, or it's just a little bit more of like a scale design. And I use this one to make my skirt wraps or my swimsuit wraps because it reminds me of something very tropical, very beachy. So with this stitch, you do have a little bit less control of sort of the shaping of the clothing, which is why I use the other stitch for things like sleeves, where I really want to have that control over the exact fit and the exact shape. But if you're going for more of a loose, drapey, sort of free-form mesh, this is such a stunning stitch. So let me show you how to do this sort of dragon scale, mermaid's tail mesh stitch. So for this version of mesh crochet, you're again just going to start by making a chain of whatever length you want. And now after making that chain, I'm going to chain an additional 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then I'm going to backtrack those 5 chains, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and into the 6th chain here, I'm going to insert my hook and place a single crochet, like so. So you should be making this loop here with those 5 chains. I'm then going to chain 4, and now I'm going back to our base chain here, and I'm going to skip the next 2 stitches. So this is the chain that we had just placed a single crochet into. I'm going to skip the 2 chains after that one, and then into this 3rd chain, I'm inserting my hook and I'm going to place a single crochet. So again, we're sort of making a loop with these 4 chains. And so again, I'm going to chain 4 and 4, and then going back to our base chain here, I'm going to go past the next 2 stitches. So this is the chain that we had just placed a single crochet into. So the next 2 chain stitches I'm skipping past, I'm inserting my hook into that 3rd chain stitch, and I am placing a single crochet. And then again, chain 4, and then I'm going to skip the next 2 chain stitches. Into the 3rd one, I am placing a single crochet, and then chain 4. And then lastly, I'm going to skip these last 2 stitches, and into this 3rd one, I am placing a single crochet, like so. So here's our first row, and it should just be pretty loose here with a lot of these big chain sections. And now we're going to go ahead and get started on the next row. So to start the next row, we're going to chain 5. So we're chaining our normal 4 plus 1 because that one chain acts as our turning chain. So I'm chaining 5, 4 and 5, and then I'm going to turn my work. And now all I'm going to do is I'm going to insert my hook underneath this chain 4. So I'm just inserting my hook right into the big open section between the chain 4 and the chain 2 at the bottom here. So just this big section, I'm inserting my hook and I'm just going to place a single crochet. And then chain 4. And then again, I'm going over to the next section here where we have that next chain 4 section. I'm inserting my hook right under the chain 4, just into that big hole or section there, and placing a single crochet, and then chain 4. And then into the next section here, place a single crochet, chain 4. And then I'm going over to the next section, inserting my hook into that just big open section and placing a single crochet, chain 4. And then I'm going to insert my hook right into this last section here at the end of the row and place a single crochet. So it should be looking like this. And now we're going to go ahead and do the next row. So we're going to chain 5 because again, we're doing that chain 4 that we normally do, plus 1 to act as our turning chain. So I'm then going to turn my work, and now right into this next just big section, I'm going to insert my hook, single crochet, chain 4. Insert your hook right in under the next chain 4 section, single crochet, chain 4. Insert your hook under the next section, single crochet, chain 4. It really is that easy. This one is probably one of the easiest ones, and it works up really quickly and it's so pretty. Chain 4, and then insert your hook right into this last section here and single crochet. And then again, to start the next row, I'm going to chain 5, turn my work, and then repeat that same process, single crochet into each of these sections with chain 4 in between each of those single crochets. And you can really decide for yourself how many chains you want to do. I think that 4 chains looks the best personally, but for your own project, you can play around with doing 2 chains in between, or 5 chains, or 6 chains. There's no rule saying that you have to have chain 4 in between each of these stitches, so you can do whatever number of chains that you want. I just think 4 is probably the most standard. So here is what that stitch should be looking like, and then you can just go ahead and repeat this throughout the entirety of your project. I wanted to show you this little poncho or shawl quickly so I can demonstrate to you the difference of the mesh stitches. So here at the top you can see I did more of that uniform sort of just square mesh like the first stitch I showed you, and then in the middle here I jumped over to quite big. I think I chained like 11 in between instead of 4. So these really big sort of dragon scale mesh stitches, and they look really good together. At the bottom, I went right back to doing more of that uniform square shape. So you can really play around with this, and you can mix in the different mesh stitches to just have different size and shapes of holes in your projects. And this turned out to be one of my favorite crochet pieces. And actually right here at the top of the poncho is the next stitch that I wanted to show you. This is such a crucial stitch if you're going to do anything with wearable art. I highly recommend that you learn this stitch. I use this most often for t-shirts, but it's also crucial if you're trying to do waistbands, or with the poncho I needed a really secure band across the top to keep it securely around my shoulders. So it's any part of your crochet that you want to sort of cinch in and have that elastic shape is going to be this rib or elastic crochet stitch. As you can see here on this sweater, I have sort of a collar across the sweater, and it's very stretchy, and it helps to just kind of cinch the entire sweater in, and it makes it so much more professional and clean cut. It adds just that little extra touch and makes the whole thing just fit so much better. And I also have it along the bottom of the sleeves here, and then along the bottom of the sweater as well. And it's just this really nice stretchy elastic stitch. For the rib crochet or elastic stitch, you're gonna start with a chain of any amount. So here I have my little chain, and now technically you can do this stitch with any of the standard crochet stitches, but it does look the best if you do it with a single crochet stitch because it's a bit of a tighter stitch. So I'm gonna go ahead and show it to you with the single crochet stitch. So I'm going to chain 1 to act as my turning chain for the single crochet, and then I'm going to go into this first chain stitch and place a single crochet. And now all the way down this entire chain, I'm just going to do 1 row of single crochet. So nothing fancy, nothing special. I'm just doing all single crochet into each of these chain stitches. And now I have completed that first row of single crochet. So then I'm going to chain 1 to act as a turning chain. I'm going to turn my work, and now we can begin the actual rib stitches. So typically when you would crochet, you would just take your hook and insert it into the entire stitch here, and then go ahead and complete that single crochet stitch. But instead of doing that, we're going to take this work and we're going to kind of tip it up so you can see the top of the work here. And at the top of the work, you can see how each stitch is made up of 2 loops. So we have this front loop of yarn or strand of yarn, and then this back sort of loop or strand of yarn. And each stitch, each full stitch here is made up of those 2 loops of yarn. So I'm going to insert my hook. Instead of going through the entire stitch, I'm going to the top here, and I'm going to insert my hook in between those 2 strands of yarn. So I'm going right in between, and I'm picking up just the back loop or the back strand of yarn, not the front one. And then I'm going to pick up my yarn and place a single crochet stitch right into that back loop. So again, for the next stitch, I'm not going into the front of the stitch here as I normally would. Instead, I'm tipping my work so I can see the top of my project, and I'm seeing that the stitch is made up of 2 strands or loops of yarn. And I'm going to insert my hook right between those 2 strands of yarn, picking up just the back loop or that back strand of yarn, and then placing a single crochet into just the back loop. So again, at the top of the project, I'm inserting my hook between the 2 strands of yarn, picking up just that back loop, like so, and placing a single crochet. So again, I'm picking up just the back loop, single crochet, and I'm just going to complete this all the way down this entire row, where I'm just single crocheting into the back loop of each of these stitches. So it really helps to tip your project and actually look at it from top down instead of this way. That way you can actually see the 2 loops of yarn and make sure that you are picking up just that back loop or that back strand of the yarn, like so. So now I'm just going to continue this all the way down to the very last stitch. So now you can see here at the end of the row that we have sort of the front loop of all those stitches popping out. So this row is lower or sort of behind the previous row, and we have all these front loops popping out, which is perfect. So then we're going to go ahead and do the next row. So I'm going to chain 1 to act as my turning chain, turn my work, and then we're going to do that exact same thing. So I'm tipping my work up so I can see the strands of yarn, and I'm going to insert my hook in between the 2 loops, picking up just the back loop, and place a single crochet, like so. And I'm just going to continue doing this all the way down the rest of the row. I'm picking up just the back loop of each of these stitches, so I'm inserting my hook between both strands of yarn at the top of each stitch, and I'm picking up just that back strand of yarn. So now at the end of the row, I'm again just picking up that very back loop of the last stitch, placing my single crochet, and then chaining 1 and turning my work. And now you can see that there is sort of a difference in the height here, where this first row is much taller than this second row because we're working into that back loop, and there's sort of an unevenness in all of the rows, which is perfect. So you're just going to continue doing this exact same thing, where again we're going to tip our project up, we're going to find those 2 loops of yarn and pick up just the back loop or strand, and place single crochets into the back loop only of all of these stitches along this row. I went ahead and did a couple rows here of this elastic crochet stitch just so you could see it really coming together. Now the thinner yarn and the smaller hook you use, the more compact the elastic will be. But as you can see here, it does have a nice stretch, and it has that sort of nice rib crochet stitch. And I wanted to mention for this elastic stitch, I don't think I have an example of it right now, but you definitely can make entire tops out of this sort of rib crochet stitch, and it's such a flattering fit. It's really pretty. I highly recommend it. But in the case of this, where I have it just right around the collar, what I did was I made the entire sweater first, and then I went back and I sort of made a chain off of the sweater. So I just inserted my hook into one of these stitches along the collar, and I chained off of the collar, and then worked my way back down, and I would slip stitch back into the project at the end of each row, therefore attaching the collar. So I just added this rib or elastic stitch afterwards onto the sweater. This next stitch is one that I came across fairly recently, but I am so excited about it and I already know it's going to become quite prominent in my crochet art. So I wanted to add it into this video and teach it to you now because this one is such an exciting game changer in the terms of crochet wearables. So this is what the stitch looks like. This is a shirt that I'm not quite done making yet, and I mean the color palette is gorgeous, but the stitch itself doesn't look like anything fancy. This is what is called a linked double crochet stitch. It uses about the same amount of yarn as a double crochet stitch, and it takes the same amount of time to complete as a double crochet stitch once you get used to it. It works up very quickly and it is the same height as double crochet stitches, but there's one thing that makes it so much better than the double crochet stitch. Let me show you. This is the same top-down design as this shirt, but this is a full completed sweater, and I did this one using just double crochet. So if I put my hand underneath, you can see my hand through that double crochet. Whenever I wear this, I wear a tank top underneath just to make sure, and although it is a decent amount of coverage, you definitely can still see your skin underneath the sweater. This is the linked double crochet, and when I put my hand underneath this one, there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing. Full coverage, and it's the same amount of yarn, and it takes the same amount of time. I'm now going to show you how to do the linked double crochet stitch. So I'm going to start by just making a chain of any amount. So once you have made that chain of whatever length you want, we can then go ahead and chain 3. If you are familiar with the normal double crochet, typically after making a chain, you would chain 2 and then double crochet right into the first chain stitch after those 2 chains. But in this case, we're going to go ahead and chain 3. So here's 1, 2, and 3 additional chains. And now I'm going to go past those last 2 chains and go right into the 3rd chain stitch, or that first chain that we made as an additional chain. So I'm inserting my hook right into that chain stitch. I did not yarn over to do a double crochet. I'm just inserting my hook right into that chain stitch. I'm then going to pick up some yarn and I'm just going to pull it right through that chain stitch. So now I have 2 loops here on my hook, and then I'm going to go to the next chain stitch here, which should be the last chain stitch that you made before we chained an additional 3. And I'm going to insert my hook right into that chain stitch, and again I'm going to pick up some yarn and pull it through that stitch. So now you should have 3 loops on your hook, which is the perfect amount of loops to then complete a double crochet. So I'm going to pull through the first 2 loops and then yarn over and pull through the last 2 loops, therefore completing a double crochet. So now again, if you're familiar with the normal double crochet, you would just yarn over and place a double crochet into the next stitch, but instead we are going to look at the stitch we just made. And as you can see here, we have sort of 2 bars of yarn. So we have this first sort of loop or bar of yarn towards the top of our hook, and then if you look a little bit lower, you can see where we insert our hook into that previous chain and picked up some yarn. We made sort of a big line of yarn across that stitch. So we have our 1 line of yarn here and then 1 a little bit lower. So I'm going to take my hook and I'm going to insert it into this bar of yarn that's towards the bottom of the stitch. So I'm going down and I'm inserting my hook from the top down into this little bar of yarn. And then I'm going to pick up some yarn and pull my hook right through that loop, like so. And then I'm going to go into the next chain stitch. So off of this chain stitch that we had already inserted our hook into, I'm going to the one right after it. I'm inserting my hook into that stitch, picking up some yarn, and now again we have 3 loops of yarn here on our hook. So then I can pick up some yarn and pull through the first 2 loops, and then pick up some more yarn and pull through the last 2 loops. So we're basically making each double crochet attached to the one before it. So now here again on this stitch, we can see that we have 2 bars of yarn. So we have this sort of bar or loop of yarn towards the top of the stitch, and then 1 halfway down a little bit lower. So I'm going to insert my hook top down into the bar of yarn towards the bottom of the stitch. I'm then going to pick up some yarn and pull it through that loop, and then I'm going into the next stitch here and I'm going to pick up some yarn. So I then have 3 loops of yarn on my hook, and I can then complete a double crochet. like so. And then again, I'm going to go top down into this bar of yarn here, scoop up some yarn, and then I'm going to go into the next chain stitch, pick up some yarn. So I have 3 loops on my hook, pull through the first 2 loops, and then pull through the last 2 loops. And you're just going to repeat this all the way down the rest of the chain, and then I'll show you what to do once we reach the end of the row. So into all of these stitches here, I'm just going to place these linked double crochets. And now at the end of the row, I'm going to go ahead and chain 3. So again, we're chaining 3 instead of the normal 2. And then I'm going to turn my work, and now I'm going to insert my hook right into that first chain stitch. So the first of those 3 chain stitches, I'm inserting my hook and scooping up some yarn. And then I'm going to insert my hook into the first double crochet or linked double crochet stitch. Insert my hook into this first double crochet stitch, pick up some yarn, and pull it through that stitch. So I now have 3 loops of yarn on my hook, so I'm going to then complete a double crochet stitch. And now we can go ahead and repeat that same process, where if I'm looking at the stitch, I'm going top down into this bar or loop of yarn at the bottom of the stitch. I'm going to scoop up some yarn, insert my hook right into that next stitch, pick up some yarn, so I now have 3 loops on my hook, and then complete that double crochet. And then again, I'm going down, top down into this extra loop of yarn, scooping up some yarn, into the next stitch, scooping up some yarn, completing a double crochet, like so. And I'm just going to repeat this all the way down to the end of this next row. And now we're going to go ahead and start our next row by chaining 3, turning our work, and then I'm going to insert my hook into the first chain. And when I do this, I like to kind of tip my work up and actually pick up sort of that back loop of the first chain. I think that looks a lot nicer, but you're just going to pick up that first chain and then pick up some yarn, insert your hook into that first double crochet or linked double crochet stitch, pick up some more yarn, and oops, there we go, and complete that first linked double crochet stitch. And then we're going into that loop of that stitch, picking up some yarn, going into the next stitch, picking up some yarn, and completing a double crochet. So now you're just going to repeat this all throughout the rest of your project, and as you can see here, the stitches are all the same height as a normal double crochet stitch, and once you get used to it, you can complete these stitches just as fast as the double crochet stitches as well. But the coverage that these stitches provide is just wonderful for crochet clothing. This last stitch is such a fun stitch just to add a little like pop of something to your crochet. So this is what is called the puff stitch, and I made this entire cardigan using this puff stitch, and it's such a fun, just extra pop to the crochet. That's all it is. Like literally the crochet itself is just popping out. So with this cardigan, I ended up spacing the puff stitches out a little bit. So in between each stitch, I did a couple single crochet stitches, where when I show you how to do this stitch, I'm just going to show you how to do each puff stitch back to back. But if you wanted to have more of a sparse crochet puff, just know with this pattern, I went ahead and in between the puff stitches, I added a couple additional single crochets just to space them out a little bit more. You could do just 1 row of puff stitches like at the bottom of a t-shirt or right around the collar, would be so cute. Or you can do just full cardigans or sweaters with this really fun puff stitch. So you're going to start by just making a chain of whatever length that you want. So the way the puff stitches work is you're going to only do the puff stitches every other row, and then you're going to have a row of a different kind of stitch in between. So you can decide for yourself what kind of stitch you want to have in between. I personally typically do double crochet because it just makes it go a little bit faster, but if you wanted the puff stitches to be really close together, you could do single crochet or half double crochet, but I'm going to go ahead and do double crochet, and our first row here is going to be the non-puff stitch row. So whatever stitch you want to have in between your puff stitches, we're then going to do that in this row. So I'm going to chain an additional 2 for my double crochet. I'm then going to go back past those 2 chains and place a double crochet into that 3rd chain. And now into each of these chain stitches, I'm just going to place a double crochet stitch, and then you can do the same thing with whatever stitch you decided you want to have in between your puff stitch rows. So I'm going to go ahead and double crochet all the way down this entire row. Okay, so after completing that first row, we can now go ahead and get started with the puff stitches. So I'm going to chain 1 and then turn my work. And now into this very first stitch, I'm going to place 1 single crochet. And now this next stitch is where we're going to do the puff stitch. So I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook into this next stitch, pick up some yarn, and pull it back through the stitch. So that's 1, and we're going to do this 5 times. So again, I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook right into that same exact stitch, pick up some yarn, and pull the hook back. So that's 2. So third time, yarn over, insert your hook into the exact same stitch, pick up some yarn and pull it through. So there's 3. Yarn over, insert your hook into the exact same stitch, pick up some yarn and pull it through. There's 4, and now one last time, yarn over, insert your hook, pick up some yarn and pull it through that stitch. So there's 5. So we did that 5 times into just this one stitch here. So now I'm going to pick up some yarn. I'm going to tip my hook down because it makes it easier to pull through all of these loops. And I'm just going to pull this yarn through all of the loops on my hook, like so. So now we're going to go into the next stitch here. I'm going to insert my hook into the next stitch, and I'm going to place a single crochet. And when I place this single crochet, I'm kind of pushing all those stitches out to the back, so that way they all puff out to the back or the front of our project, like so. So there is our first puff stitch completed, and now into the next stitch we're going to do the same thing. So I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook into the next stitch, pick up some yarn, and pull it back through the stitch. So there's 1, and we're going to do this 5 times. So yarn over, insert my hook into the same exact stitch, pick up some yarn for 2, again for 3, yarn over, insert your hook, pick up some yarn, 4, and one last time I'm inserting my hook, picking up that yarn for 5. Again, I'm going to scoop up my yarn, tip my hook down, and pull it through all of those loops. I'm then going to go into the next stitch here and place 1 single crochet, which is going to help push all those loops out to the back of the project, therefore completing our second puff stitch. And now into this next stitch here, I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook into the next stitch, pick up some yarn and pull it through. And again, we're doing this 5 times. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then I'm going to scoop up some yarn, tip my hook down, and pull that yarn through all of the loops. I'm then going to insert my hook right into the next stitch and place a single crochet. So we now have 3 puff stitches, and we're going to go ahead and complete the rest of this row in the same manner. So here we have that whole row of puff stitches, and now we're going to do our row of filler stitches in between. So again, I'm doing double crochet, so I'm chaining 2 and then turning my work, but you can do whatever filler stitch that you want to. So into the very first stitch here, I'm placing a double crochet, and you might have to kind of push the puff stitch down, but you're going to find the stitches just sitting right on top of each of the puff stitches. So right into this first stitch here, I'm placing a double crochet. And then again, sort of at the top of the puff, you can find this next stitch. If it's hard for you to see the stitches, then tip your work up like this and look for these sort of 2 loops of yarn, and then just go through both loops like this, and that is your next stitch. And then again, here's my next stitch. So you're just going to double crochet into all of these puff stitches of the previous row, or whatever stitch you're doing in between. So double, single, half double, whatever stitch you're doing, you're just going to go into each of these stitches across this row, making sure that you are picking up each stitch for the puff, and then also each of the single crochet stitches in between the puff stitch. And now for this next row, we're going to do another row of puff stitches, because we do the puff stitches with every other row. So I'm then going to chain 1 and turn my work, and we're going to start the row with a single crochet. So the first stitch here is a single crochet stitch, and then we're going to yarn over and begin making a puff stitch. So 5 times I'm going to yarn over and insert my hook into this stitch. There's 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then I'm going to pick up some yarn, tip my hook down to make it easier, and then pull it through all of the loops on my hook. Into the next stitch here, I'm going to place a single crochet and kind of push that puff stitch out to the back of the project where you can then see it there. And then you are just going to repeat that exact same process, alternating between a row of normal crochet and then a row of puff stitches. So every other row you are doing puff stitches, and then every other row you are doing double crochet, single crochet, or whatever stitch you want to. So those are 5 of my favorite crochet stitches to use when I am designing crochet projects. Let me know if you wanted to see any more, because I do have more stitches that I like to use. These 5 are just kind of my top go-to stitches. And if you wanted to practice any of those stitches by making any of the designs I have shown you throughout this video, I will have the tutorials for each and every one of those patterns linked in the description down below. I also have a bunch more crochet tutorials using these stitches here on my channel, so if you want to peruse my channel a little bit, maybe subscribe, you could do so. Thank you so much. And if you wanted to follow me on any other social media, I will put them all up here as well as in the description down below. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful and blessed couple of days until I see you again. I will see you very soon with another crochet video. Goodbye.